Hey, everybody! Welcome to Let's Talk About Things and Stuff, where we talk about things and also stuff. I'm your friendly neighborhood youth guy, Matt Parker, and there's my good friend, Katelyn.
Hey.
How you doing, Katelyn?
All right.
Pretty good?
Yeah.
Did you work today?
No, I'm off today.
Oh, awesome. That's why you look so rested and...
I mean, I actually got 8 hours of sleep last night, so...
That's exciting.
That's
I
amazing.
know.
Yeah.
So I have not done that in a long time.
Yes.
You have a child, so it's very reasonable as to why you haven't gotten a full night's of sleep.
Right?
That's
So-
fair.
Yeah, and so, if you haven't met, this is Miss Kimberly,
Hello.
who recently had a child, if you didn't catch that from the
My
comments
son will
just now.
drop, hey, I have a baby now.
Yeah. Do you have any pictures?
My phone is elsewhere, but
That's all
I
right.
have so many pictures if you ever want to see them.
Yeah.
I call it my daily Dawson dose.
How many hours of sleep are you getting each night?
6, which is pretty great.
That's pretty good. And
Yeah.
he is 3 months?
2.5.
2.5 months.
Yep. So he's actually doing really well. I'm not waking up every 2 hours and staying awake for an hour each time like I was a month and a half ago.
Yeah, yeah. He's super tall.
He is very long, giant. He's a giant child.
Makes sense. Makes
Yeah,
sense. Because you're so
I'm
tall.
very tall. Yeah, he got it from me.
Right? So what is the biggest change you've had to make in your life from pre-baby to post-baby? Not post-baby, because the baby's still around. But
I said the baby's going to be there for a while.
to post-pregnancy. How about that?
I have to think through my evenings a lot more like structured if I want to get sleep.
Ooh,
So like running the dishwasher every night so that his bottle stuff is ready, and making sure we're on top of our laundry and all the different things so that if he falls asleep at 9:30, I can go to sleep at 10. So I have to start that process at like 7. Well, no, not 7. He eats it. Like there, you have to like do it in like 45-minute increments in order to be successful by 10 o'clock and be able to sleep. So it's a constant math.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah. That's fantastic. Well, congratulations. We're glad Dawson's around.
We like having him. We'll
Yeah.
keep him.
Yeah, yeah. So we got some fun things to chat about. But first, I would love to hear about what you guys are consuming in the cultural arena.
Oh, am I going first?
Yeah,
You should go
Katelyn,
first.
what you got?
So a little background of mine is the Sykes brothers, mainly the second to youngest, Zach, has often shared about a podcast of a friend of his brother's called the UnderWater FlyZone. So that is
Okay.
what I started listening to.
Is that what UWFZ stands for?
Yes,
Okay.
UnderWater FlyZone.
Awesome.
Fly, not flight.
UnderWater
Fly like.
FlyZone.
Fly zone. Fly away. Okay.
And so he's on his 4th season right now of what he's producing, and I've only listened to his first season so far, and so far it's like a motivational, positive, I don't even know how to describe it, but just in this first season he didn't necessarily go into anything biblical or directly relating to his Christianity, because he is a Christian. And I've seen of the clips that have been shared via Zach, he has further since talked about it on his podcast.
Okay.
But it's mainly been this first season. I finished all 10 episodes. They're quick little 30-minute listens, and then he has a challenge at the end of every episode, because he does one a week. Or at least that's how he started.
Oh, nice.
And so he'll do a challenge of go and tell 1 week it was he had go tell one person you love them, one person that you respect them, and then another I forgot what the other statement was, but you find those 3 separate people and you tell them intentionally, I love you, I trust you, or I respect you, and something else, but intentionally being positive and loving and connecting with those you have around you, because one of his major motivations to his podcast is he lost a good friend of his to suicide. And so he's wanting to also spread mental health awareness. So that is part of the purpose behind his podcast and since clothing brand that he has started. So
Okay. Very nice.
Mhm.
So you would recommend?
I would.
Yeah. Do you feel encouraged after you listen to the podcast?
Well, I listened to all 10 episodes in a matter of 4 hours. And it was the first half of my shift at work.
It's a lot of things going on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just like being able to just have my headphones in and then doing whatever I'm needing to do at the time because we weren't open. It was an early morning shift. Mm-hmm. But I mean, he got some good advice. So.
Okay. All right. And the title of the podcast is UnderWater FlyZone.
Yes.
All right. And is this an official thumbs up? Go listen to this endorsement.
Yes.
All right. Fantastic.
Cool.
Very cool. I have been watching something almost exactly the opposite from that. Okay. So Wednesday has been out for a while, and I watched parts of it while my daughter was watching it. My oldest daughter, Marilee, watched it, loved it. And I would kind of catch parts of it when I had time to sit down and watch it with her. But I'm not like a fan of like the horror genre or the macabre, death for death's sake, all of the stuff that the Addams Family is known for, right? So it's just not my thing, but it's really well done. And there's that dance, that what's her name, the actor, Jenna Ortega, yeah. Is plays Wednesday, who is in trouble for putting piranhas in a swimming pool. Again, not really my jam, right? And so she gets transferred to this school for the outcasts, Nevermore Academy, and the show is all about her assimilation or lack thereof and there's this mystery that comes out because a mysterious monster shows up and starts killing people, right? Okay, so a couple of things. It's really well done. The story is mostly well told. They're not afraid to kill people and important people. So I like that. I like it when shows aren't afraid to kill people. And so that's definitely a thing. What I don't like about it is like one of the charming things about the Addams Family and what made their macabre stuff work in the TV show in the 50s was that they were all dark and deathly and monsterly, and it was set in direct juxtaposition to like their neighbors who were like the most positive people in the world. Now, Wednesday is stuck with her roommate, who happens to be a werewolf youngling who hasn't wolfed out yet. And she's just like super positive and bright colors and stuff like that. And like the window in their dorm room is half bright colors and half like black and gray and all of that. So there's that. But everybody else in the show is super dark and mysterious. Even what they call the townies, like the thing that drives me the craziest is like the two potential love interests, which is also really weird that Wednesday Addams would have a love interest. Okay, but anyway, that's another thing. She's kind of a sociopath, so they don't usually have love interests. The two potential love interests are both teenage guys who talk like this. Their teeth are always closed and their mouths barely move when they talk, and it's always in this low, gruff kind of, well, I don't know what you're talking about, Wednesday, kind of thing, except like different because they're teenage guys and not, me. And they don't really sound like Clint Eastwood. But it's like they're dark and mysterious and all of this stuff, and that kind of thing just drives me crazy. I don't know. In any show,
no relief from the dark characters. Right?
That's it.
There's no comic relief. There's no.
Yeah, there's some funny stuff, but it's not like it's not what you would expect from an Addams Family kind of show. Mm-hmm. And then the mystery, like they lean on a couple of cheap tricks to get you to the end, and I won't tell you about those in case you watch them. But
they're cheap. So be prepared.
They're cheap tricks, and so. That's a little crazy. I've watched it 4 times now. Once with Marilee, once with Misha, once while I think Cassidy, or I don't remember exactly what it was. Maybe Marilee was watching it with somebody else. Anyway, and now Megan has gone through it, and every time I fall asleep or get disinterested and do something else. And that's just the kind of show it is for me. So, anyway.
So you do not
Wednesday,
recommend it.
if you're into the macabre, kind of mysterious, dark stuff, then sort of maybe 3 out of 5. For me, though, I would probably put 2 out of 5 for me. Yeah, I'm probably not going to watch it on purpose on my own ever again. So,
There you go.
what about you, Kimberly? What do you got?
Cool. So Dan and I started watching The Acolyte, which is the new Star Wars live-action
Fun.
TV show that came out Tuesday at 8 p.m. We
Oh,
got
yeah.
on at 7 to see it, and it was coming out in an hour. So we circled back last night. 2 nights. When was it? Maybe it was last week. I don't know. Time runs together sometimes. So we were watching it. It's really interesting. It's set a century before Episode 1, Phantom Menace of Star Wars. So it's the earliest in the Star Wars timeline they've created. And the Jedis are in it, and then there's like these other mysterious dark forces that I won't tell you about because I'll ruin it if you want to watch it. We're 3 episodes in, so the jury's still out on where they're headed with it, but it's well done. Disney does things well. It's very different than most Star Wars TV shows that they've made.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
Same, different, or kind of in between to the Marvel stuff that they've been putting out?
Ooh, different, because I don't think Disney Star Wars has fallen off the ledge that Marvel did. In my personal opinion, I think Marvel created the multiverse and then it got out of control. So every new thing that they've done has just been worse. Unpopular opinion. It's okay.
Oh, I agree completely.
I cringed my way through the last Guardians of the Galaxy, and Guardians of the Galaxy is my favorite. We're like, this is written for I don't even know what. So I feel like Star Wars is still creating quality things. They have some moments where they do stuff with the Force that's like, is that really important, or like, did you really need to go there? But like they're just making it up now. The Force can heal or whatever. Spoiler.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think it can, but sometimes they think it can. So, yeah, it's still good. They're still making quality. They don't have this whole issue like Marvel does where they have multiverses where all of a sudden there's multiple timelines and they at least have like one storyline.
That is the cheapest of all cheap tricks in my book.
Absolutely. Yes. Things started contradicting. Oh, it's a multiverse. That's just how it is. And then we can keep making movies.
That person's dead. Oh, well, they still live in the multiverse and we can just bring that character back.
Mm-hmm.
That, like I said, I'm a fan of killing people, right? You can bring them back in flashbacks all you want.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Star Wars' version of that is people don't always die when they die in Star Wars because lightsabers cauterize wounds, right? So if you even if you get chopped in half, well, that lightsaber cauterized your wounds. So there's a chance that you might show up in a later animated series. True story.
Yes.
So like that, I mean, it's really hard to actually kill someone. For good in Star
Unless you're
Wars.
Obi-Wan Kenobi in episode 4, it's 4.
Where he just goes...
where the lightsaber evidently just kind of makes him dissipate into thin air, and his cloak just falls to the ground. But nobody else who's ever struck by a lightsaber
disappears
that I've seen, that I've noticed.
Maybe it was the willingness with which he went, because he was ready to die. So maybe he just like got absorbed into the Force.
He was like Jesus. He offered up his spirit into the Force.
Maybe not.
And returned. Maybe not. Or not.
Not quite.
Yep.
Well, speaking of being like Jesus, let's talk about the Southern Baptist Convention.
That's a transition.
Which is also maybe not quite like
Maybe
Jesus.
not quite
That's
like
what we're
Jesus.
gonna talk about, right?
Yeah. Okay, so Kimberly, you've been following this really closely. Tell us about what's going on in the Southern Baptist Convention this week.
Yes, so every year the Southern Baptist Convention, the SBC, has their annual meeting. So this year it's in Indianapolis, I believe, in Indy. So 10,000 pastors and ministry-minded people from Southern Baptist churches across the nation all descended. Not ascended. I almost said ascended. They all ascended.
Like
that would be news. That would be crazy news. They descended on Indy,
Jesus.
and they have their annual meeting where they talk about all the things they're mad about, or they make important decisions for the SBC. They voted a new president in this week, so they had several issues on the docket. One of which was started several years ago, and then an amendment was proposed, and they were voting on this amendment on the role of women in the church and whether women can be pastors, and if they can't be pastors, what does the SBC do about churches that are members of the Southern Baptist Convention that have women as pastors? And so that was the amendment they were voting on. The amendment said the SBC believes that women cannot hold the role of pastor, not just senior pastor, but any pastoral position, and therefore if any church in the SBC has women as pastors, they're going to be automatically disfellowshipped or dismembered, as I said earlier, in jest. So, that vote failed today. Yeah. Yesterday, they voted to disfellowship a church that had a woman pastor. They disfellowshipped them on the grounds that they were too egalitarian. Mm-hmm. They didn't have the right views of the role of men and women. So that vote passed with a 91% yes. But then this one, which would automatically disfellowship every single church, that was in a similar position. That one failed by 5%. They needed very few more votes to actually pass it.
And was it last year or the year before that they famously disfellowshipped Saddleback?
They disfellowshipped them, and then I think they re-voted on it or something. They made it official last year in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Saddleback's still out. So, and now FBC Alexandria, I think, is the church. Out
of Virginia.
Which Google is onto it, because all I had to do was type FBC, and the link to FBC Alexandria came up as suggested at the very top. So everyone's been Googling their church.
Trending.
Enough for Google
Trending for all the right reasons.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, fantastic. Well, that's good for us, Pastor Kimberly.
Yes, so the irony is, while this vote was happening, the two of us, Blake and Rachel, were all in his office planning a sermon. Yeah. Which, according to the vote, was... we weren't going to be able to do if the vote had passed. Which, for the record, we're not an SBC church. So we couldn't have gotten disfellowshipped anyway, because we disfellowshipped ourselves already.
And also, ironically, one of the larger SBC churches in our community is having their kids camp this week. And at the moment that vote was being taken, probably 90% run by women in the church.
But don't worry, they're just directors.
Oh, they're just directors.
Yes.
They're not actually doing pastoral ministry.
And I went down the rabbit trail on the website for the amendment, and basically the distinction between a pastor and doing ministry is the pastor has a shepherding role in addition to the teaching role, so that's a leadership position where you're going to lead and guide your flock, your people. Whereas a women can still teach in the church, but when they take that step towards the authority to shepherd and guide, that's when it becomes a major no-no, according to the SBC.
Okay. That's very interesting. Why should we care about that?
Why should we care?
Why should we care?
Well, I care a lot because it indirectly affects me. We're at a church that affirms my calling to ministry, so my job is not directly in jeopardy. There were going to be probably a lot of people whose jobs were in jeopardy if they declared no more pastoring for women. I think it's important to know. Well, okay, so it's a control thing, right? The SBC is telling churches what they should believe, and then making decisions based off of that, and that's not healthy.
Yeah, and it's also not Baptist doctrine. Like what makes a Baptist church are things like we affirm
autonomy of the local church.
Autonomy of the local church. Churches can gather together and make decisions together, but they each have their own decision-making capabilities for their own flock.
Which means they can decide what they believe.
Yes, and so we call it a big tent. A church can do most things, and the other churches in a convention, even if they've agreed to be together in this thing, aren't really supposed to be able to say anything about that, because they make the decisions for their own flock. As long as they're affirming the basics of the Christian faith as put into the Baptist Faith and Message. We affirm the Baptist Faith and Message from 1963, but since the Baptist Faith and Message 2000 came out, there's been a whole kerfuffle about the level of control that the Southern Baptist Convention is trying to put onto the local church. And there are other denominations that the structure of their convention or their denomination tells their churches what they should believe. So those are creedal, like the Catholic Church tells Catholic churches what they're supposed to believe, or the Methodist or the Presbyterian. Right. They have governance on down that basically says these are the tenets of your faith in your church. What made Baptist different is there's general, these are the general beliefs that are secondary to the gospel that in general Baptists believe, but each church had their own freedom to decide whether or not they actually held to those specific non-salvific beliefs. Right. But this is an overstep in that. Yeah. So, okay. Do they have a point? What do you mean? Do they have a point about like women being pastors? Like, is this something that the Bible actually talks about, and a reasonable person could read the Bible and come to this conclusion?
I think you can. I disagree with that interpretation of the Bible, but there are a lot of people I know and respect that come to the conclusion that women should not have that authority. And while I respectfully disagree, there are verses you can point to that say, well, it does say this. It does say women should be silent in church, and in one of those passages. And if you take that literally, I need to really be quiet.
Yeah.
But then there's context to be considered, right?
They point to those passages and they twist it so that women don't have to be totally quiet in the church.
They can make announcements.
They can say stuff, but they have to define it to 2 or 3 different levels so that they're not contradicting themselves when they say they can't be pastors.
Or they take the passages that talk about the office of the elder, and instead of interpreting it as like the man with one wife, as meaning like you're not married to multiple people, they take it to mean it has to be a man married to a wife, right?
Some go even so far as no single men can be elders.
Because it says a man with one wife, not just like, hey, you probably should be loyal to your wife if you're going to be an elder and married.
Or
right?
Loyal to your spouse.
Your spouse, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
That's more accurate. So verses like that, I can see how someone would come to that conclusion. But then you have the flip side where you see like Deborah in the Old Testament,
right.
who is the prophet, spiritual judge. She's a military leader, a prophet. She was a spiritual leader, all of those things, which they would say that was the best we could do with them because of the men in the situation failing. They're saying
right.
God was using a bad situation and
right.
doing the best person possible, but that was
right.
not ideal. If there had been a man, it should have been a man.
So God actually called Barak, but because Barak failed in his leadership role, Deborah had to step in, and that was a sinful thing. But God blessed it anyway, even though it was Yael who won the victory in the battle. Anyway,
there were women all over that story.
Yeah,
so the whole argument is anytime you see a woman in Scripture that plays a prominent leadership role, it's because the men in that situation were failing to do what God had called them to do.
Right.
And so even though she might be sinning by being a leader, God is redeeming the situation for his glory, and we need to work hard to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah. What I find interesting in this whole conversation is the fact that like 2 or 3 verses in the New Testament are being used as the foundation to color the whole rest of Scripture. So they've got these 2 or 3 verses in the New Testament by which they interpret the rest of the Bible. As pertains to women and men, rather than seeing the whole story and saying, seeing that these 2 or 3 verses, they're a little different. So what's actually going on in that context to shed some light on why this is so different? And it is so very different from how God interacts with women and men in their different roles throughout the whole rest of Scripture. That is one thing that I've struggled with for a long time, and until it was only a few years before I came here that I got a satisfactory answer, because I was struggling with this deal, because I see this as it plays out practically in the church. Like there's such a large role for women in the church, just practically right now in every church, because there's just,
we like to do things.
There are just more women involved and ready to do stuff.
And that might have to do with work schedules and things like that, some practical things, but also...
And from what you were saying earlier, that could be seen as a sinful thing. Women are just put in the position and God blesses it anyway. I don't buy it. But anyway...
But as long as a man has a veto power, like that's
right.
basically the concession churches have gotten to, is over time women have stepped up where men failed. So like women went overseas before men. There were a lot more women who went overseas for missionaries in the early mission 1900s, and then the men finally caught up, and so they had like all these different avenues, and so all the concessions were, well, as long as there's one guy who can do the Lord's Supper when he comes around on the mission field, or one guy who can veto the heresy when it's eventually going to come around, then it's okay because there's a man over the situation.
Okay, this is my favorite thing about this whole conversation is this. I really think that what we're fighting against is a political. What these folks are fighting against, or perceive that they're fighting against, actually ends up being more of a political thing. They're fighting a political slide into progressive thought. And there's a whole side of the American Christian church that takes a progressive view on the scriptures, that it's not once and for all handed down from the saints, and that it's not, whatever you mean by inerrancy, that it's not an inerrant work and not directly from God and all this stuff. So how does that interact with our conversation here?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. If you go to, there's a website, SBC Amendment, I think is the name of it, that the pastor who proposed the amendment has a video for 8 minutes. He's talking about why he thinks this amendment's important, kind of how it came to be, why it needs to be passed. And it's really fear-based. Like, this whole conversation seems to be very fear-based because they use the whole, like, it's a slippery slope. So they're saying if you look at scripture with the theological gymnastics you have to do to be okay with women in ministry, then it's just one step further that you're going to take theological gymnastics to basically say inerrancy. Or the thing that they're actually on their website hanging their hat on is they're saying if you affirm women in ministry, then you're one step ahead of being open and affirming for the LGBTQ community, because then they list all of the denominations that took both of those steps back to back. And so the SBC, politically, they don't want to go there, and so they're saying we can't be divided over this, because if we get divided over this, it's going to get out of hand and it's all going to fall apart, and then we'll end up like CDF, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, which I don't buy that.
I don't think those are related.
That argumentation drives me crazy in two different ways. One is basic debate and logical fallacies, which say that the slippery slope argument is to be avoided. It is a logical fallacy to say, because those people over there took this step and then went those next few steps, then we must necessarily take those extra steps if we take this step.
That it's inevitable.
That it's inevitable.
To
right?
quote Marvel.
I am inevitable. That's what Thanos represents. Oh, it's the slippery.
So much sense now.
Everything just clicked for me. But the other thing, other than just logical fallacy in that argument, the other thing is that that assumes that the complementary view. Complementary. There it is. The complementary view is where you have the hierarchy of roles for men and women. Complementarian. There you go. That view is the accurate conservative view. When I would suggest that the accurate conservative view is actually to have men and women in partnership in ministry, fulfilling their various roles as equals, rather than a hierarchy, because the only hierarchy in Christ is God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, and everybody else. But we've created this human hierarchy that I think was initiated at the fall, not as a curse from God, but as a consequence. This is just what's going to happen. You're going to fight for power. There's going to be a power differential because of the work of sin. And so this complementarian view is actually sin, an effect of sin on
that we should be trying to strive against, because you see in Genesis when he says, and he shall rule over you, that's part of like the result of the fall.
Yeah. It's not God saying, I'm placing him in charge of you. Mm-hmm. It's him saying, you're going to struggle for power. You're going to desire power over him. He's going to struggle for power over you, and most of the time he's going to win. Right? Yeah. And that's what we've seen happen over world history so far.
Yep.
So anyway, okay. So my question, Katelyn.
Oh gosh.
You kind of haven't been saying much. Okay.
I'm not saying that I'm positively knowledgeable in this area.
Right. But you're from a younger generation.
I am.
You're a little bit younger than Kimberly.
Mm-hmm.
What does this kind of event in the Southern Baptist Convention and this kind of vote, what do people of your generation, your kind of friend group, how does that make you guys feel about church stuff and convention stuff and like organized religion in general? Like if you had this conversation with your friends, what would their response be?
Well, it depends on the friends I'm talking to.
That's true.
But, I mean, most of them I don't see would really have a great, a dramatic opinion on it, because there's some that are not believers or not strong believers. And, I mean, there would be some I know would think on the, like, you know, the feminist side, like white feminists, who, you know, you've seen the extremists of that, which I don't have any, like, feminist friends who are extreme feminists.
Right.
But they will have feminist tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
And so they will, if, you know, they paid close attention to this, they'd probably find issues with it, mm-hmm. being that, you know, they have those beliefs in being equal with man and all that. But, I mean, personally, I don't care that deeply because, I mean, for the church I'm in, I've grown up with women as leaders and ministers, and I've turned out perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Well, and our church has done such a good job over the years of not being like all the other SBC churches, even when we were, because, mm-hmm. like, my husband grew up here, and he had no idea until we started dating and getting married, and we were talking about, like, the bigger church as a whole and all these issues. He had no idea that churches function like this. He thought here, the way First Baptist Lee Summit operates with women and eventually ordaining deacons and all the different things was just completely normal. Yeah.
Do you find that to be true among most people that you interact with? That you don't know or care? They don't know or care about what the heck Southern Baptists think about women in ministry?
I would imagine so, yeah. I mean, I don't go talking about the Southern Baptist Convention to many people of my age.
It's not used to your normal work conversation.
Let me tell you about that darn Southern Baptist Convention.
Yeah, it's not my typical, you know, topic to bring up. But I wouldn't imagine they'd have super big opinions on it, being that they aren't. A lot of my friends that aren't believers, they aren't super affected by it. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. So for the Southern Baptist Convention to be making such a big deal about this in this moment, it feels more related to our American political situation than it does with actual theological. What do you think? Does that track? Do you find that, or?
I think the fact that the women in ministry debate and the LGBTQ debate is intertwined for the SBC mm-hmm. in their minds makes it political. Right. I don't, if you were to separate those and you were just going to start talking about women in ministry and it wasn't rooted in the sphere of a slippery slope that they're saying, mm-hmm. I don't think that's really in reaction to anything in our political culture, except for maybe like 5 years ago when you have like strong feminist movement. But I don't see those effects quite as strongly or people reacting quite as strongly to those words as maybe they did a while ago. So yes and no, maybe. Okay. On surface, not so much. When you dive down deep, I think it's a fear of the American political scene.
There's certainly a correlation side-by-side thing going on mm-hmm. here that maybe some of the fears of the political system stuff mm-hmm. happening is bleeding over into, well, maybe we might be heading in that same direction. Or?
I suppose there's also the whole political stance of we need to conserve the nuclear family. And that would be in relation to some women in ministry debates, that if you are someone who views that the guy has to be the head in the church and the house, that dad's in charge, he makes the final spiritual decisions for the family and all the decisions in the family. If you have a mom who's now like in the church leadership and all that, like trying to be more in charge than the guy, then that's going to break down the nuclear family, and that's not God's plan. And then it unwinds. And I think because of what's going on in other avenues like LGBTQ, there is that fear of like, oh, the nuclear family is falling apart. So maybe that is pretty related.
Well, I mean, I would agree though that if either spouse is taking an overarching role of leadership, like if we're in a true covenant partnership in marriage, then we're going at this together, mm-hmm. and like my wife is really great at some things, and I'm really great at some things, and as we work those out in our family, then things work great. If I ever try to take more of the things that she's great at that I'm not good at, then things tend to fall apart. Mm-hmm. And I think that's true in the church as well.
And I think my difference of opinion than this conversation is, I think every marriage, those strengths and weaknesses are different, right? Mm-hmm. So you and Misha's division of how y'all do things is based off your strengths and weaknesses. Yeah. How Dan and I do things is based off of our strengths and weaknesses. And so it's not like, well, I have to do X, Y, and Z because I'm female and he does this and it's all perfectly balanced. We may swap some things according to what our experience is and how we do it. And there's no room for that in the conversation that the SBC is having.
That's right.
And then there's no room for that in the church, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Good conversation. I think we're out of time. But, Katelyn, any last words? What are you? No? You're good?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we would love to hear what you have to say about this conversation. Please be civil if you add them into the comments, or you could accost us on the streets. Just walk up to us and start the conversation. I know we'd love to have that conversation with you anytime. Not anytime. I'm just kidding about that. Here's a question for you. Should this conversation matter? Do you think that it actually matters in your day-to-day experience of who Jesus is and your experience of the church? Does it really matter who's up front leading in the service or in a classroom, in a Sunday school classroom, or wherever you are in church experience? Does it matter? Come up to us, leave your comments in the comments, and we will see you again next time.